morning and welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg, and I'm glad to have you here with us today. I am Reverend Meg Biddle. I am the National Coordinator for Ministry Life and the American Baptist Personnel Services, and I serve at ABHMS in the Leadership and Mission Building that is in Pennsylvania. So thank you to everyone for joining us. Today, my guest is Dr. Ryan Burge. I didn't make sure I was pronouncing your name right, so I apologize.
You did great.
Okay.
Great.
It's important. Names are important. So we have Dr. Ryan Burge, who is my guest today and will be a part of Space for Grace that's taking place in Kansas City out in September. So I want to invite everybody to come out and meet Dr. Burge. Can I call you Dr.? Do you want me to call you Dr. Ryan? I didn't ask.
Just call me Ryan.
Just call you
cool.
Ryan. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm Meg. So Ryan is an incredibly busy guy. He is the assistant professor of political science at Eastern Illinois University. He's the co-founder and contributor to Religion in Public, which is a forum for scholars of religion and politics to make their work accessible to the general audience. He's also a dad, a husband, pastor of the First Baptist Church in Mount Vernon, Illinois, writing a couple more books. And so thanks for taking time to join us today, Ryan. I appreciate it. I asked you before we went live, when you sleep, and you're like,
I don't sleep. I don't know. I mean, I try to keep a balance, but I also realize, work is what makes your legacy live a little bit longer, and sleep doesn't really give you much of a legacy. Like, no one's like, wow, right, so-and-so got a lot of rest.
Right.
That's great.
I'm like, I'll sleep when I'm dead,
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly. You got to work. There's work to be done. So,
right. So my very abbreviated introduction of you, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit further to others?
Yeah. So my name is Ryan Burge. I have a PhD in political science from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. I finished there in 2011. And then a year later, I started teaching at Eastern Illinois University in Charleston, which is sort of the middle of the state, about 45 minutes south of Champaign-Urbana. I have been there, like I said, for about 10 years now. I started in ministry at the age of 20. I was a youth pastor. I actually started as a youth ministry 3-month summer internship at a little church in Centralia, Illinois, which was an American Baptist church. I grew up Southern Baptist in First Baptist Church of Salem, which was kind of the prototypical religious right, evangelical church in the 1990s. So everything went along with culture war and those kind of things is what I grew up with. And then when I was in college at Greenville University is what it's called now. It's a free Methodist school. One of the faculty came into our philosophy of youth ministry class and said, "Hey, is anyone looking for an internship for the summer? I have this opportunity." I was in a meeting in Centralia where I live, and this one pastor said he needs an intern. And I said, "Hey, that sounds like a great opportunity for me," because I couldn't find another summer job, to be honest with you. And so I applied, and I got hired a couple of weeks later, and that 3 months turned into 3 years. And I became more aware of ABC USA, what they do, what they're about, all those kind of things. And then when I left there to go to grad school, the first year I was in grad school, I was actually the pastor of a little church in Marion, Illinois called Warder Street Baptist Church, which actually doesn't even exist anymore. It closed down a couple of years ago. I was pastor there for a year. First time I ever preached every Sunday. I was 23 years old. And then I quit that job after the first year in grad school because I got a graduate assistantship. And I didn't think I could do two things at one time. I wanted to focus on my studies more. And then in like September, October of that second year of grad school, First Baptist in Mount Vernon called and asked if I would come preach. And I did one Sunday, and they asked if I would come preach the next Sunday. And they called me a week later and said, "Would you like to preach every Sunday?" And so I became the interim pastor of First Baptist Church in 2006. And somewhere along the way, the interim label got dropped off. And I've been there for, I'll be 16 years in October. I'm the longest serving pastor in the history of the church that was established in 1868. Our congregation used to be one of the largest in our community. We had over 300 people. And on an average Sunday now, we have between 10 and 15 people. We have given our building away, and we all sort of know that the inevitable is coming, and our church organization is probably going to close down. Although we kept saying that 5 years ago, we said that was going to happen, and it hasn't happened yet. But it does seem like it's the end is coming at some point in the next few years. So that's sort of my ministry background.
Wow. And that's a whole nother conversation, though, the closing the church building.
I could do an hour on what it's like to be a pastor of a church where you are the plumber, the electrician, the drywaller, the real estate agent, the insurance agent, and everything else in the community, because I've had to do all those things, because that's one thing people don't realize about a small church is in a bigger church, the plumbing breaks, you have a plumber that goes to church, or a handyman, someone who can help you with this, or an insurance agent or a real estate agent. When you're a small church, you don't have those kind of resources. And in my church, it's older people, and 80% of them are women. So basically there's like 2 or 3 of us men who can, step up and replace a water heater if it breaks, or work on the HVAC or something like that. So my job as pastor has become much more than just preaching on every Sunday. It's become all these other logistical things that happen week to week.
I hear you. When I was serving as pastor, both in upstate New York and in central Illinois, you were also the snow shoveler.
Yes.
What else? I mean, yeah, you're everything. And my first church, I lived right across the street from a funeral home. So, if they weren't Catholic, the funeral home called me. So, so you mentioned just a little bit your books that, and specifically the one called Nuns.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have one that was just released, you said this year?
There it is right there. You can see it. 20 Myths About Religion and Politics in America just came out in March. 20 little self-contained chapters.
Okay.
So can we talk about the nuns, like how that book came about?
Yes, that's what I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
Is that
cool.
I just want to make sure we plugged the other book, though.
Yeah. No.
But
yeah.
The nuns. Why did you wake up one day or something like that and decide, hey, I'm going to write a book about nuns?
It didn't happen that way, Meg. I'm gonna be honest with you. So in 2019, I tweeted a graph with some new data from what's called the General Social Survey, which is a survey that social science has been doing since 1972. And the 2018 data had just come out. It measures a lot of things, but it also measures religion. So I tweeted this graph out. And at that point, I was just a no-name academic. Like, I had like 600 Twitter followers. I mean, I was not doing much of anything. And I tweeted this graph out. And actually, the introduction of the book, The Nuns, tells this story. I live 100 miles from where I work. So I'm driving home thinking about this data, like the whole time home. Like, I got to make this graph. So I get home and I make this graph, and I realize I saw something, which is that the nuns had now risen, and they were as large as the largest religious group in America for the first time, at least as far as we can tell, going back to the 1970s. So my kids were little at the time. They were like 5 and 3. So I had to get them in the bath because they had to go to bed. So I'm making this graph and running upstairs, putting them in the bathtub, running back downstairs, making the graph, like tweaking it, make sure everything. And then right before I get them out of the tub, I hit tweet on the graph. And then I get my kids out of the tub. I wash them off, dry them off, and then I put their jammies on, read a book. They go to bed. I look down at my phone, and the tweet that I sent out, which might have on a good day gotten 2 or 3 retweets, gotten retweeted like 50 times in the first like 10 or 15 minutes. And then from there, it just kept going and going and going and going. And it got retweeted over 1,300 times. I was contacted by CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, agencies in Europe wanted to talk to me. Like, I went from never talking to a reporter before to literally like having to schedule reporter calls over the next couple weeks. And I made the front page of Reddit, got 70-some thousand upvotes. I had people from high school emailing me and say, I saw you on the cover of this, or I saw you doing this. And that was in March of 2019. And then about 6 months later, I get a cold email from Fortress Press, which is a Lutheran press based out of Minneapolis. And they said, hey, we're working on a new series. Do you have any book ideas? And I never really thought about being a book writer. Like, that's not how I think. I'm a short burst kind of guy. Like, 800-word blog post is a lot for me in terms of like attention span. But I was like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. So I write up this really quick treatment, like a 6-page treatment of what I thought the nuns was going to be. I send it off. And like 3 weeks later, they're like, we love it. We want to give you a contract to write the book. And so, I signed the contract, and The Nuns came out in March of 21, and I hit their sales target in the first 3 weeks for what they wanted the Nuns to sell in Lifetime. And that led to the second book, the one I just showed you, 20 Myths. And that really has led to speaking things. I was on Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. I flew out to Las Vegas to do part of that. It's just like I'm speaking to members of Congress next week, at the end of the month, about the nuns and what they mean for American politics and American society. So, just writing that book has opened up all these doors and all these opportunities. And everyone wants to talk about the nuns. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I knew the tweet showed me that's what people cared about. And so why should I have to try to drive people to say, care about this thing I care about? Instead, let's say, what do you care about? Let me show you how I can make you understand that in a more comprehensive way. That's really what the goal of the nuns was. And it's done really, really well, in terms of sales and reach and impact. So that's how all that came about.
Wow. That's just amazing. I mean, congratulations. First of all,
thank you.
So as you did all this work, I mean, did you go out and interview these nuns? And I mean, what's some of the background behind that?
So I'm a quantitative social scientist. So I just deal with data all day. That's the way I've been since I was, my second year in grad school. I really kind of fell in love with data and surveys and graphs. And so to be honest with you, my entire life has sort of brought me to this moment. And, it's like one of those things where you don't, Søren Kierkegaard said you have to live life forward, but it only makes sense in reverse. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my life. And so what really this all comes down to is when I was in grad school, I was kind of a very conventional academic, right? I was very I'm going to do what everyone else does and publish in journals and those kind of things that other academics do, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But I never felt like that was sort of like my calling or what I felt really good at or really accomplished with. When I was at EIU, I was on a year-to-year contract to begin with. And so every year I would get a new contract, let's say in May for the following academic year. It was just a year-to-year situation. And then in 2015, we got a new president at EIU, and his first directive was to slash budget. And I had been issued a contract in May. And in actually this time that year, that contract was ripped up in 2016. And they said, you're not coming back. Your pay ends August 31st. You're done with us, which for any academic knows that's like the kiss of death, because jobs are not available. That's not the way it works. We hire people in November for the following August. That's the way the cycle typically works. And so through some kind of haggling with the union, they found enough money to bring us all back for one semester. So I went from being fired to being rehired to being fired again in December. And in that semester, I basically said to myself, okay, I'm done with academia. I'm leaving academia behind because it's basically left me behind. There's no opportunities here. And so I basically began learning new software packages and new ways to visualize data that other academics weren't doing. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go get a job in the private sector doing this sort of data analysis, data visualization stuff, because there's actually a lot of jobs in the world for that kind of work. And at the time, I started tweeting out these graphs using this new software package it's a lot more aesthetically pleasing. It's a lot easier to do. And I just started tweeting out these graphs, not knowing really, it was more like putting up a job ad for me, right? Like I can get a job doing this. Well, that ended up being my entire Twitter persona. So now in an average year, I make about 1,600 graphs. Most of my books, like The Nuns, for instance, had the first version has 42 graphs. The next version is going to have over 70 graphs. I see the world through graphs. That's the way I think about the world. That's what I'm known for. That's sort of my brand, to use that terrible term that people don't want to use. That's my brand online. I'm the religion and politics data guy. And so all my books are basically just quantitative surveys that I've conducted sometimes, but also that other firms have conducted and made their data publicly available. And I think that actually is the real value that I bring. It's not my opinion, right? It's what the data says. And I'm trying to get people to think about the world empirically. So in doing all that work to try to get a job in the private sector, it actually kind of turbocharged my academic career as well. And I actually began publishing a lot more academically. And that's what led to, writing The Nuns, writing 20 Myths, writing all these other things, is my ability to sort of bridge the gap between academic social science and, popular culture, and trying to, tell people there's a lot you can learn here. Let me make it more palatable to the average, Twitter user. that's kind of my forte, and that's how I've gotten to where I've gotten, is by being a bridge, being a communicator and a translator between the academic world and the real world where people actually pay attention to things.
So your book is very different than one of those that might approach this that say, okay, so here's the scary numbers, folks. Let me scare you. You know, all these people, nuns, duns, all that. And the fix is Jesus.
Yeah, I don't go that route in the book, because I try to write the book for both pastors, but also for nuns to understand themselves at the same time. I sort of see myself as being a neutral arbiter for empirical truth, whether it be this, this group or that. I mean, I've had days, and this kind of, speaks to how polarized we are. There's not a lot of people like me in this world. Like, you're either like a progressive theologian or you're an evangelical theologian. You hardly ever cross the stream, right? Like, you're not seeing like a Southern Baptist pastor at Wild Goose, right? Like, that doesn't happen because, we're so encamped on our side. I refuse to do that, right? Like, I don't want to be seen as being too much of one thing or too much of the other thing. And so I've had days where I was on CBN, Christian Broadcasting News, in the morning, and then did a Freedom from Religion podcast in the afternoon, because I like that. I want people to look at me and go, he's not playing for my team or their team. He's playing for the data, right? What the empirical objective reality tells us. And if that makes you mad, great. That makes you happy, great, right? You know what are pastors supposed to do? Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That's my job, I think, as in 20 myths. I mean, some myths make the liberals feel really good, and some myths make the liberals feel really bad, and vice versa. I want people to realize the data doesn't always back up your worldview. Oftentimes it challenges your worldview, and that's okay. So, my whole goal is to be sort of like a blank slate, right? You can't tell and I've actually had, I've had like conservative people come to me and go, you know what I like about you? It doesn't look like you have an agenda. That's cool. Like, that's even like yesterday, Ben Shapiro retweeted me, who is writes for the Daily Wire, an incredibly conservative person. But I've had, very liberal people retweet me at the same time too. I've had Sam Harris retweet me, the famous atheist. So that's what I like. I want to be seen as not on your team, which is problematic, because when the nuns came out, the nun said, "Why are you trying to convert us?" And the pastor said, "Why don't you give me more ways to help convert the nuns?" So, you can't win trying to be both things, but I think it gives you a better platform, a better audience. I think it gives you more opportunities to, get the message out there. It's also hard. You also catch a lot of criticism, like where you stand in the middle of the road, you get hit by cars coming both ways. Mm-hmm. That's kind of been my career, but I like that position as opposed to being, super one thing or super the other thing.
Okay, I appreciate you a great deal, and your authenticity and who you are, and being okay with being hit by cars coming either direction. Because I grew up in the middle of a cornfield in Indiana, and the person that I was at the beginning of my ministry versus the person I am now has evolved so much. I get that okay, I will buy this book because maybe I would read that and they would tell me how to fix the church. But I'm not there anymore. I get that the church is broken, and sometimes things that are broken need to stay broken.
And that's, we're taught in grad school, don't be prescriptive, right? Like, don't say you should do I think that's where I kind of bump up with theologians and stuff, because they're always talking in should language, like, we should do this. And I'm like, I don't know what you should do. I'm telling you, if you do this, here's probably what's going to happen. And, I tell my students, I go, think about, like, if you want to get a job in the administration, whatever administration it is, imagine if people don't see you as a Republican or Democrat, the number of job opportunities you have has just doubled overnight, right? If you want to be like hyper partisan, that's fine. But understand your job prospects have now been cut in half, if not more, by your political posturing, right? I think what I'm talking about is relevant to literally the entire spectrum of American society, from very liberal to very conservative, from very atheist to very evangelical. Everyone needs to hear this message, because I think they can all learn something. And the greatest joy that I find personally is when I show something to somebody, like in a talk or whatever, like I'm doing a presentation, and you can see in their mind, they go, "Oh, wait, I'm not crazy. Like, I know where I fit now. And I understand like why things feel different." I can show you why they feel different with the data. And people go, oh, like their existence is being confirmed and affirmed by what I'm showing them in these long-term trends. Everyone needs to have that experience, not just very liberals or very conservatives or atheists or evangelicals. Like everyone needs to understand. We all kind of float through life, not to use like a cliche, but like in the Matrix, Neo says like a splinter in your mind, right? Like this idea that you can't figure out what's different, but something's different. My job is to come in and go, here's what's different. Here's why you feel differently about these things, and here's what it means. So I think that's my job. My role as a pastor, but also as an academic, is to do both those things at the same time. And I think you can do it. You can do it well if that's your goal. If you want to be partisan, you want to speak to the congregation, preach to the choir, go right ahead. But that's not my bag. That's not the way I see myself in the world, and I never want to be that way. I want to be kind of here for everybody,
And I'm a parent of 3 children. My oldest has autism. My younger 2, 19 and 12. But the way their worlds work now versus the way my world worked when I was in high school, and these conversations that you're having, they're going, yeah, this guy would make sense. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm going to go home tonight and tell my 19-year-old that you were retweeted by Ben Shapiro, and she's going to be like, that's awesome. Because, that's part of the conversation that we have in our house on a regular basis is, do you know what Ben Shapiro said today? And how tall he is, and, all those sorts of things. But
by the way, I do not endorse everything Ben Shapiro says, tweets, or thinks.
No, I understand that. And I wouldn't ever think that.
No, but that's the thing. I don't think when someone very liberal retweets me, I don't think that you know what I mean? I don't endorse what they think, say, or tweet, right? Like,
right.
That's where I am. Like, if you find value in my work, like the governor of Arizona follows me on Twitter, Steve Ducey. I mean, that's like, cool. What in the world, right? And I have New York Times columnists follow me, and literally from the entire spectrum. We need more in society. Here's what I think we need more of. We need more explainers and a lot less yellers. There's too many yellers, right? Like, who are just like, let's get mad about this, and let's get grumpy about that, and look at how stupid the blank whoever it is. We don't are. My job is to say, yeah, that was really dumb, but you do really dumb stuff too, right? Like, your position on this is nonsensical. I mean, there's someone's like, well, you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. I think you can stand for being objective and trying to see both sides and really understanding that there's value. And this is something I actually push against a lot. If the media wrote about Muslims the way they write about evangelicals, no one would be okay with that, right? Like, evangelicalism, I grew up evangelical. I am not an evangelical today. I say I'm evangelical sympathetic. But the way they're talked about in popular culture is like they're worse than the worst. Like, they're awful people. And I want to say, listen, I grew up around a lot of evangelical people who would literally give you the clothes off their back. They would give you a room to stay in. I know all kinds of Southern Baptist relief organizations where if a tree falls on your house, they will come cut the tree down and take it away for you at absolutely no cost. Like, there's a lot of value. And I think that's the thing that gets lost in a lot of popular media is it's religion is bad, especially conservative religion is bad. And you know what? For a lot of people, I get why they see that way. If you're LGBTQ, I get why you are not a huge fan of evangelicalism. But at the same time, Muslims are anti-LGBTQ. The majority of them are as well. And you know what? So are Black Protestants, by the way. Black Protestants have the same view of homosexuality that white evangelicals do. And a lot of the media gives them a pass because they vote for Democrats. I think that's the problem we have to think about, right? You can't just give someone a pass because they vote for the person you like. If they have a theology or a worldview that you think is suspect, you need to call them out for that. And I think that's my job, is to say, you're all wrong. You know what I mean? Like, you all have fallen short of what you think you are, whether you're evangelical, whether you're atheist, whether you're Black Protestant, whether you're Muslim. No one gets a pass in my world. If there's something wrong, like, I yell at atheists all the time because the fact of the matter is they try to act like they're so progressive and so open and so diverse, when the fact of the matter is 48% of atheists are white dudes. in a society where white people are now the minority. 48% of all atheists are white males. Like, how do you square those two realities that you're all about diversity and inclusion when half of you are white guys? Like, you're as patriarchal as evangelicals are if you get right down to it. So there's all these ways you can critique every group, and I think they need to be critiqued because all they usually want to hear is they want a pat on the head and being told how great they are. Yeah. And they're not as great as they think they are. So I think that's my job is to make everyone feel uncomfortable, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. And I really appreciate the comment, especially about the yellers, and needing more explainers, because, as we've had, Roe v. Wade and shooting after shooting after shooting, where you drop your child off at school and you've just got to stop and go, please God, not another one, let mine and everyone else's babies come home tonight, kind of thing. And you're walking around, like fist balled, angry. And you're going, I'm tired of being angry and I want to do, that.
But you know what part of that though is, Meg, is we've normalized extreme views in this country in a way that kind of is startling in a lot of ways. Like, for instance, let's take the gun control debate. There's a whole movement now fueled by Facebook and social media called the No Compromise movement. And their rallying cry is the NRA is too liberal on guns. We need no gun control at all in this country because guns are given to you not by government fiat, but by God himself. Your right to own a weapon is God's, favor upon this nation. Without the internet, those people would not find each other. Now the internet allows them to find each other. Like that's a caustic worldview, I think. And we need to call out extremes, like void the FOID. Like in Illinois, that's a big movement. Like where you have to get a FOID card to own a weapon in Illinois. They want to make sure you don't have to have anything to own a weapon. You can literally go buy whatever weapon you want, however you want, without any license or registration. That's an extreme view. Like call that what it is, right? Like we need to be very clear about calling things out when they really truly are extreme. When you own a view that's 5% of the country, that's an odd view, right? Let's say you're a communist. You want America to go to like collectivism. That's an odd view, guys. Like if you want like governments to take over corporations, that's an odd view. Like someone on Facebook was complaining about how in my town gas is higher than it is like 30 miles away. Government needs to do something. I go, okay, so you're in favor of communism then. That's an odd, you have an extreme view. Like let's call it what it is. And I think that's the other problem is I'm totally cool telling people like an 80% distribution, like, okay, you have differing views, but we need to call people out on the fringes on both sides and say, what you believe is odd. And just recognize that you have a very odd belief system. And when people don't believe you and when you feel like they're constantly trying to like tell you you're wrong, it's because you have a very bizarre view of the world. I think that's where we get to. Right, is you got to be able to draw some lines. The problem is a lot of liberals want to draw a line right in the middle of the political spectrum and say everything to the right of that is wrong. And then conservatives want to say anything to the left of the center is wrong. Let's move our lines out to the edges a little bit more, right? And say like, okay, you can be a moderate liberal and I don't hate you, or a moderate conservative and I don't hate you. But if you have one of these like caustic ideologies, toxic ideologies, then we can all rally around and go, you're wrong. Like you're messing. Like for instance, the people who want to jail women who get abortions. That is an extreme view. Like are people who don't want to write exceptions in the laws for life of the mother or rape or incest. Those are extreme views, but it's also an extreme view to say, I want the government to pay for all abortions in this country. That's an extreme view too. Right. So call those out for what they are and then say, okay, let's talk about reasonable policy. Right. Where's the middle on gun control? Where's the middle on abortion? Because there are a lot of people in the middle on both those topics, by the way, and their voices are drowned out by the people on those extreme sides because they're the loudest. They're honestly the craziest. And they're the most likely to go viral on social because social media rewards crazy. It doesn't reward moderate. And, I feel like my role is to try to say, but I can do something about that. I can balance the scales out a little bit because there's no one else balancing the scales out right now. It's just crazy on both sides.
So somebody reads your book, a pastor reads your book, picks it up.
Yeah.
There's not the 12-step solution or whatever to fix religion in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's this information for them that this is how we got to the nuns, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, I want people to have nuggets. Like I was on a podcast today and someone pulled out a nugget I forgot about from the nuns, which is the modal age of an evangelical, which is the age that shows up the most in the data. Like if you put all the evangelicals in the data and the one you picked out, most likely to pick out, the modal age is 58. I forgot about that data point. The modal age of an evangelical in America is 58 years old. That doesn't terrify evangelicals. They're not paying attention. Right. I like giving people nuggets like that because it gives them ways to think about like, wow, we've got problems too. This book's about the nuns primarily, but it's also about here's a little like a rabbit trail to think about over here and over there. I'm not a prescriptive guy. I want you to read my book and highlight a bunch of stuff, right? And tweet like, look, Ryan Burge said this in this book. That's really interesting. Let's have a conversation about it. I'd rather start a lot of conversations and end a lot of conversations,
Because isn't that really, how we try to find our way back together again is those conversations, not the yelling, like you said.
Yeah.
It is coming back together. Is that?
Yeah, we say no, that's what churches are supposed to be, is bridge building institutions, right? And in the 1980s, late 1980s, it used to be that like half of evangelicals were conservatives and half were liberals. Half of mainline were conservatives, half were liberals. Half of Catholics were conservative, half were liberals. And now it's overwhelming, like 70% of evangelicals are Republicans now. The mainline's a little bit more equal, but they're also declining in size rapidly now. So they're losing their, sort of prominence. And Catholics, the people who go to mass are actually much more conservative than the Catholics who are cultural Catholics. They've actually left the church probably for political reasons. So the problem is, it used to be like you would sit next to people who are different than you on Sunday morning. And now you either don't sit next to anybody because you don't go, or if you do sit next to people on Sunday morning, you sit down next to people who think about the world exactly the same way that you do. And that makes you feel like you're super right? Because your worldview is being reinforced at every step of the way, from the pulpit, from the pew, in the parking lot. They're all telling you what you want to hear. And you feel like, wow, look how smart and good I am. It used to be you were challenged from the pulpit. You were challenged from the pew. You were challenged in the parking lot to rethink how you think about immigration, guns, abortion, race, whatever it is. And now you're not being challenged. You're just being patted on the head. And I think that's a really, really sad way to go through life because you never think about the possibility of I could be wrong and why am I wrong?
Right. I think that's part of the reason that, that being the pastor wasn't the best role for me, because my job is to make you uncomfortable. And my job is to go, wait a second, what about those immigrants? And what if we threw the church doors open? And what if we welcomed these people? And they're going, well, yeah, as long as they're all just like us, come and then change, but change to be the person we want you to be. No, can't we be different people and just love each other? But apparently we can't. We can't. Is that what happened? Is just that there's that need to make you have to be this or this. There is no, is that how we got to these nuns? Because you either have to be this or this. You can't be in the middle.
I think for a lot of the nuns, it was we like to have unified lives, right? So we want everything in our life to sort of like line up behind this central concept. And I think for many people, it's become partisanship. It's become like the guide stone for the rest of their lives. And so, if I'm a liberal, I'm not going to go to an evangelical church because they talk about things like, gay marriage. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about race or immigration or whatever I want to talk about, right? Leaving religion is probably the easiest thing we can do. It's hard to change your gender. It's impossible to change your race. It's difficult to change your economic standing, your income. It's very easy to leave a church. It literally takes nothing. You know what I mean? Like, you just walk away. And actually, the data is showing us more and more that people are doing that. That moderates and liberals are leaving conservative churches, especially during election years, because they're just tired of hearing messages that conflict with the way they view the world. And so the easiest thing to do is just get up and go somewhere else or go nowhere else. And actually, what we're seeing more and more is they're going nowhere else because there's really, in a lot of parts in America, there's not moderate or liberal churches available in rural America. I'll take my county, for instance. We're Jefferson County, Illinois, about 35,000 people or so, okay? Right now, we have a handful of mainline churches. Mine, the American Baptist, we have 15 people on an average Sunday. The ELCA Lutherans and the PCUSA had to join together in one building because they could not afford to be separate anymore. So they're both small congregations. The Episcopalians can't meet anymore because they can't find a priest. And the only church that's probably going to exist, mainline church in my county, in 20 years is the United Methodist Church, which has several hundred people on a Sunday morning, but there's an upcoming split amongst the UMC over the issue of same-sex marriage. There's a good possibility that 300 might become 100 or 150 after they actually vote on this move. So in 20 years, in a county of 35,000 people, there might be one mainline church in the entire county when there are at least 100 evangelical churches. So if I'm a moderate or I'm a liberal and I want to be a Christian in my county, I got one choice. If you want to be a conservative and be a Christian in my county, you have at least 100 choices. So that's going to drive people away just by the very nature of that not having options.
So their choice is going to be the nuns. And that's how we got where we.
Yeah. But they still believe in Jesus. They still think, that religion's very important in their lives. They aspirationally wish they were more religious, but they just can't be. Because they have no outlet for that religiosity. And you know what? They're lonelier because of that. Their spiritual health is worse because of that. Their emotional health is worse because of that. And I think it creates a more difficult society, a more atomized society, right? Where these people, they would have been in church and really kind of stirring the pot before, now just left church because there's no pot to stir for them anymore. And now we're worse because of that. Think about what all these mainline traditions have done across this country. The progressive era was on the back of the mainline Protestant church. And they do things like soup kitchens and clothes closets. A lot of these mainline churches, by the way, don't have a lot of people, but have a ton of money. I mean, they have endowments that date back 100 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in an account somewhere, and they can't feed people, not because they don't have the money, it's because they don't have the people, the volunteers to actually do the feeding. Right. That's the reality we're facing in 20 or 30 or 40. I'll give it a great example is the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church in America, I wrote a piece called The Death of the Episcopal Church is Near, which if you look at the data is absolutely true. They did less than 16,000 baptisms in 2019. In the entire country, less than 16,000 baptisms. On an average Sunday, about 500,000 Americans go to an Episcopal church. In comparison, there's 13.5 million Southern Baptists, okay? And about half of them go to church every Sunday. So for every Episcopal that goes to church every Sunday, there's 12 Southern Baptists. So, orders of magnitude different. But here's what's fascinating about the Episcopal Church. They have the Trinity. They own a church on Wall Street in New York City. In 1 year, the endowment from that trust they own generated $300 million in interest income. One church, $300 million. They're literally sitting on billions of dollars of endowment right now. 500,000 people, billions of dollars in endowment. What are you going to do? What's the future look like when you literally have all the money you could ever want and none of the people that you need to actually administer that money and help people? That's the future of American religion, while these non-denominational churches who have literally nothing in the kitty because they were started 12 years ago in a guy's basement are growing rapidly and have no money but lots of people. So we're going to have a situation where money, no people, people, no money, and that's the future of American religion.
I mean, yeah, wow. You're exactly right. You just explained the great conundrum of the last church I served was we had an endowment, but everybody was tired. Nobody wanted to do anything. They're so tired. I love the church. I love Jesus. I want to be in my community, but I'm so tired. I get it. We're all tired, but come on.
And the thing is, you can limp along on an endowment for a long, long time. We've done it in my church. We draw from our endowment all the time to keep our to keep us functioning, because we would rather give that to, mission and purpose. And we do, by the way, we do mission. I mean, our church, our entire church budget is about $35,000 a year. On top of that, we spend $8,000 a year on a Brown Bag Friday program where we give brown bags of food to kids in our local community at the schools, because our public school is 85% free or reduced lunch. So we pack a brown bag, over 200 brown bags every Friday during school, and distribute those to kids in our community who will go hungry over the weekend. And our little church, which is getting harder and harder because we have fewer hands to actually help pack the bags, spends almost $10,000 a year packing those bags every year against a budget of $35,000. So literally 25% of our budget in a typical year goes to one mission. So we are doing this, right? We are giving to our community. And that whole thing was predicated, by the way, on the fact that Rob Bell once said, if your church closed down, would anyone outside your membership really care?
Right.
And 10 years ago, the answer was no, not really, because we impact our community not at all. And now if we close, there's 200 kids every single weekend who will go hungry because we don't exist anymore. We've shown our community why we matter and what we do. And I think that's what more churches need to think about. You don't have to, do a huge program. This program really takes like 5 or 6 people. It takes some work. If we had a bigger church, it'd be a lot easier because we could spread that around. But it's not a hard program to do, and it impacts lives. I'll tell you one quick story before we go. We in that bag, we put a little flyer that says, "We're First Baptist Church. We love you. We don't know you. If you need anything from us, here's our number." One day we gave out this bag, and we got a call at the church that Friday. It's a grandmother. She's raising her grandson because he can't live with his parents, which is happening more and more in our community. And she said, I don't have a lot of money, and winter is coming. It was October, and it's cold. It's getting cold, and we don't have a coat for him. Can you help us get a coat? And we said, you know what? You're in luck. We're having a rummage sale in the fellowship hall this very weekend. Come on down before the doors open to everyone else, and you can take whatever you want for free. And that grandmother and that grandson came in. I didn't get their names. I don't care about their names. She filled up 3 big grocery sacks full of clothes for her and her grandson and left with a smile on her face. At the end of the day, that's my job as a church, as a pastor, as a community. And I hope one day when he's sitting at the bar 10 years from now and people start railing about how bad religion is, how stupid it is, he goes, you know what? There's one church who didn't know me but loved me. They took care of me when no one else took care of me. And you know what? I might not go to church, but I don't hate it. There are good people there. I think that's how you change the conversation about faith in America, about what we do, what churches do in America. When it becomes too much about Joel Osteen and not about the small churches who feed hungry people, then we got problems. We need to keep doing the good work of feeding people, clothing people, taking care of people and making life a little bit easier for people. That's what it's all about. That's what faith is all about for me and my congregation. And I hope, it's easy to get discouraged looking at the number of the nuns and religious polarization and political polarization and stuff. But at the end of the day, if you want to go out and change the world, change yourself. Like that's the only thing you can do. And I think that's what we're doing in my church. And I wish, and I encourage other churches to think of really small but tangible ways in which they can change the world around them.
I agree. And I mean, we could even get into that whole, those who have been wounded by the church or feel like they've, but that's yet another conversation on those who were in churches that were not perhaps the kindest church and things like that. But there are other churches, and we're not all the same. We're definitely not all the same. The one question I have left is the one that I ask everyone. I mean, joy. Where in all of this? I mean, it's exciting. Yeah. Where is it? The coat? Is that what brings you joy in your ministry?
It does. That part brings me, from a minister standpoint, that brings me a tremendous amount of joy. Yeah. I mean, that's something that'll keep me warm for years to come, spiritually warm for years to come. But also what brings me joy is just seeing the light in people's eyes when I help them make sense of the world around them. I mean, that's kind of like the academic joy that I get, trying to explain the world in a way they've never heard of before is such an amazing gift. And it is a gift. And I'm just thankful that God's given me the ability to do so and put me through this weird, broken, windy road to get where I got today. I'm fine. I keep trying to remind myself that 20-year-old Ryan would think that 40-year-old Ryan is doing pretty well for himself. And that's what I find joy in, is trying to say, like, I did it. I made it, and I'm helping other people by doing what I'm doing, which is the best part of the whole thing. I'm not exploiting anyone or taking advantage of anyone for, me having the platform that I have. Instead, I'm trying to make their world better, and I'm trying to make my, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Yeah. The more I help people, the bigger my platform becomes, which is the more people I can help. Yeah. What an amazing thing, Yeah. And I think I really, try to sit back and rest in that sometimes when I feel like I haven't done enough in the course of a day. I think, okay, I've come a long way. And that's what gives me joy, is knowing that I'm actually living out the purpose I think God put me on this earth for as best I can.
Yeah. I appreciate you and your ministry. I'm actually going to go home and share this with my 19-year-old because I think for her, it's important. And I think a really important part of this all is that you're not just trying to fix everything, that you're not going, here's the prescription, to fix the broken, because who says they're broken? and I think it's beautiful. I really do. So if people want to connect with you, they can. I've got your Twitter here at Ryan Burge on Twitter.
At Ryan Burge. Yep. Feel free to. My DMs are open. You can slide into my DMs if you'd like. Ask a question. You can find me at ryanburge.net. That's my personal website. My email address is out there. I mean, you can find my email address very quickly. It's ryanburge@gmail.com or rpburge@eiu.edu. But you can Google my name and you'll find my email address.
Yep.
And you can buy The Nuns, where they came from, who they are, where they're going, at Barnes & Noble or Amazon or where fine books are sold. 20 Myths is available on Amazon. The audiobook of 20 Myths just came out about a month ago. So if you're into audiobooks, actually both of my books have audiobooks now. So if you want to do an audiobook of that, I would very much appreciate it. And I also will be at Space for Grace in Kansas City in September to talk a lot about the nuns on a panel discussion about, religiously unaffiliated people and what the church can do and think about them.
And are you doing book signings or anything while you're there?
If people want me to bring their book, I'll sign whatever they want me to sign at this point. So I'm such a new author. I don't assume anyone wants to buy what I have to sell. So, I'd be more than happy. You never know. I'll be more than happy though to sign a book, have a conversation, just hang out and, be with my American Baptist folks. Yeah.
And I look forward to meeting you, in person and, stalking you on Twitter, things like that. Because,
Please do.
You feel like you're, oh, wow, famous by association, kind of, like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, that kind of thing.
I'm most certainly not famous. I will tell everyone asks, are you, my boys, they're 10 and 8 go, are you famous? I go, only in a very weird part of the internet, my friends.
I get that.
Not generally famous, like weird niche famous, which is not famous at all.
No, yeah.
People aren't going to find me on the street. Maybe if I was at like a religion conference, they'd be like, oh, I know who you are. But beyond that, people don't know who I am, which is totally fine with me. I don't want to be famous. I want to be, do my job as best I can. And that's all I care about, really.
Exactly. So. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for taking all this time out of your day to have this great conversation with me. It's been a lot of fun. And actually, I learned a lot myself. So, and keep doing the good work that you're doing. Thank you to everybody who watched and will watch this. And this has been Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. And I hope that you will join us at Space for Grace and tune in again next week. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.